All right, back here on this Tuesday edition of The Sweat. I'm Emerson Lotzi, Jesse Cofield, back from her 5-week vacation. And now, everybody, we have a 6-game NHL slate on the docket tonight. Steve is not here to talk about it, but we do have Paul Bruno from RotoWire and also Pete Jensen, host of the Fantasy on Ice podcast for NHL.com. I'm very excited for this segment of NHL Opening Faceoff.
So am I. Paul's guy, Austin Matthews, is the highest priced center on the slate tonight in a very favorable matchup against Columbus. However, he has been held off the score sheet in his last 2 games. So is Matthews a fade for you tonight at that price, Paul?
I fade him, but I'm going to use his line mates because he's just too expensive tonight. That's the only reason. But there's 4 other mismatches on the board at center, Jesse, that I want to touch on real quick. Barkov for $8,300 versus a reeling Preds team. People may not know they're on a 4-game losing streak right now. He has 13 points and 37 shots on goal in his last 10, primed for another big offensive output to lead the NHL's highest scoring team. Ryan Hartman of Minnesota is similarly profiled, $6,800, a cheap price tag for him. Center on their first line, 11.3 DraftKings points per game on the year, centering a top power play unit against an Ottawa club. And then Thomas Hertl is centering the hottest winger in the league, Timo Meyer, right now. $5,500 his price tag at Anaheim. He's got 9 points in his last 10 games. And finally, Ryan O'Reilly, $5,700 for a St. Louis club that should be all over Philadelphia tonight.
All right, Pete, what do you think? Matthews a fade because he's just too pricey here?
Yeah, it's tough with Toronto. It's so fickle. You know, you love them one game, you can't stand them the next game when they lose to Montreal. So it's really tough to gauge Toronto on a nightly basis. I'd much rather have Alexander Barkov for $1,000 cheaper in DraftKings price. Couple other guys I like on the center position, definitely Joel Erickson. With what he's doing on Minnesota's first power play, I think is a really good value at the center position, and still a guy over $5,000 that you'll have to spend a bit for, but he's got 5 points in his past 4 games, and a bunch of those coming on the first power play unit where he plays with Kaprizov and Zuccarello and Matt Boldy. So never a bad thing to get some Minnesota Wild action in your DFS lineup because they're extremely deep, and Erickson is proof of that, because he plays on their third line at even strength.
All right, well, some solid plays. I'm looking here at the wing tonight, above 7K. Kaprizov, you've got Marner, Meyer, which Paul's already mentioned, Tarasenko, all going up against teams that like to give up goals, too. So who is your favorite high-priced option on the wing tonight, Paul?
If you want Toronto exposure, like I said, I want to go for Mitch Marner. Save $1,000 on the Matthews tag and take Marner here. I think the Leafs are going to be really ticked off, and they're going to take it out on a Columbus team that's going to be fielding their third string goalie tonight. Timo Meyer, I said, he's the play on the wing for me. 8 goals his last 10 games, along with 49 shots on goal in his last 10. That's the most prolific shooter in the league right now among the wingers. And then Matt Zuccarello. I mean, Pete touched on Minnesota's offense, and Zuccarello's been a key part of that. 16 points in his last 10 games played. You get him for $6,500 tonight.
All right, Pete, where are you going here on the wing, man?
I'm going Patrick Laine, the other side of that Toronto matchup against Columbus. I mean, nobody's hotter than this guy. He's got a 9-game point streak with 18 points in the span. That's real points, so not DraftKings. Really impressive what he's been able to do in a bounce-back season since coming back from that injury. You know, he's been extremely motivated, and he's looking like the Patrick Laine of old, where, 3-4 years ago you would have said, who are the, 2 hands worth of most exciting players in the NHL. Patrick Laine certainly would have been on that list. He's playing with Boone Jenner and Jacob Voracek. Jenner's having a breakout season. Voracek is a great distributor, so that all affects Patrick Laine. And when you look at Toronto giving up, those goals over the weekend to the Blues, and then, bad outing against Montreal recently, it's the stage is set for Patrick Laine to continue what he's been doing in a very positive light fantasy-wise.
All right, on defense tonight, we can't ignore Aaron Ekblad of the Panthers. No. He's had a goal. He's had an assist in each of his last 3 games. He is going to cost you $6,500, but is he too hot to ignore on the blue line, Pete?
You definitely want to try to get some Florida Panthers in your lineup tonight, whether it's spending up for Ekblad, spending down for Mason Marchman on their third line with what he's had breaking the slates lately. He had a 6-point game. He had a hat trick last Friday. So I wouldn't mind a little Ekblad for first power play exposure for Florida, and then stack him with an even strength teammate like Mason Marchman to ride the hot hand there. On defense, I'm also looking at Justin Falk. He's got a 6-game point streak, 1 goal, 5 assists in the span. Good coverage as well, with 15 shots and 10 blocks in that 6-game point streak. And he plays on the second pair with Torrey Krug, so you get that bump from an offensive standpoint. And of course, the Philadelphia Flyers are a ripe matchup for almost anybody these days. They're allowing the 5th most shots on goal per game in the NHL. So pretty much any given night, no matter who they're playing, they're getting peppered. So more times than not, that results in scoring for especially such a deep offense like St. Louis this year. And they're getting Vladimir Tarasenko back. So that's even more strong players that Justin Falk is going to be playing with at even strength tonight.
All right, Paul, how do you feel about this? Do you want to spend up for Ekblad?
No, I think there's better options, and I love the one that Pete highlighted. I'm all over that Justin Falk call. I think it's a great one, so I'm going to put him in my lineup too. Give me a chance to go a little bit higher, but not quite as high as Ekblad. I'm going to take Morgan Reilly of the Leafs. Career best scoring pace on the season, 43 points in 49 games. The most consistent Toronto player all season long. And he is going to be a guy that gets in that dressing room and lights a fire under this team tonight. I expect a big effort from the blue and white. And then I also like a bit of that Florida action. Pete made the case for them. Mackenzie Weegar is a guy we haven't talked about much this season, but he's contributed 30 points in 50 games for the club, 27 shots on goal, 13 blocks in his last 10. And don't forget Nashville's on that 4-game losing streak, so I think Florida's going to be all over them tonight.
All right, dudes, let's talk value play here. Who is your favorite on this entire slate, Paul?
3 guys stand out for me. Braden Shen, $4,200, 7 goals, 4 helpers in his last 10 games played. He's averaged almost 12 DraftKings points per game in that stretch, and that should be the floor tonight against Philadelphia. Sam Reinhart for Florida, $4,900. He's a point per game guy on their second line an offense this year, 13 points, and in his last 10 games played, 14.6 DraftKings points per game in his last 10 outings. That tells me he's well above his season average, 4 points above it, in fact, in that stretch most recently. And then I got to take a little piece of the Toronto offense for cheap dollars. Alec Turfoot, cheap exposure to Leafs second line, which has been in the doghouse for a while. I think they break out tonight. He's got 7 points in his last 10 games, so he's doing his part offensively too, in the throes of that slump for the rest of the other guys. And I don't believe another third-string goalie is going to limit Toronto's offense tonight on back-to-back nights. Do you think?
I don't know, but it's not a shocker to hear you having some exposure to Toronto at all. Let's go, Pete. Favorite value play on this entire slate, dude?
I mean, the fact that Sam Reinhart from the Panthers, who we mentioned have a great matchup, the fact that he's sub $5,000 is insane. I mean, he has 47 points in 47 games this year. And I mentioned how he's playing on the third line with Mason Marchman, Anton Lundell, arguably the best third line in the league. If you have the cash to spend up extra $500, it's a huge upgrade over Marchman, who I mentioned earlier, because, yeah, again, $4,900 is amazing value for a point per game player this deep in the season. And then one of the other guys I mentioned earlier, Jacob Voracek, playing with Patrik Laine and Boone Jenner, he's only $3,900. And he's on power play 1 with that strong unit, Zach Werenski, Patrik Laine. They've been cooking lately. So, yeah, maybe sprinkle in a little more Columbus action. Not to say that you would overlook Toronto, because it could be a high-scoring game. But don't sleep on those Blue Jackets, because they can hang with anybody on the scoreboard lately. Even in some of their losses, they score like 4 or 5 goals.